Hello, welcome to India Business Hour. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening: a trade deal between India and the US before the 1st of August deadline is ruled out. Sources say the deal stalled after US proposed 20% tariffs on India and expected zero tariffs in return, similar to Indonesia and Vietnam. Access to agri and dairy sectors remains a flashpoint. That's an exclusive. Prime Minister Modi is scheduled to travel to the UK tomorrow. The much-awaited India-UK FTA is expected to be signed on Thursday. Sources say both nations have been in close touch since Prime Minister Modi and UK Prime Minister Starmer announced the deal. Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar's surprise resignation with 2 years left in his term on the first day of the Parliament session creates a flutter in the corridors of power. Sources say tensions with the government over Dhanker backing an opposition motion to impeach Justice Verma could have led to a sudden exit. In fact, just 10 days ago, Dhanker had said he would complete his term barring a divine intervention. AxisBank eyes an additional 10% stake in its life insurance joint venture with Max Financial Services, may seek the RBI's approval to acquire the stake, which will help Max Financial raise 5,000 crores. AxisBank would become the promoter of the company if the deal goes through. That's an exclusive. In a sudden move, Anup Sahas resigns as the MD of BajajFinance with immediate effect. Vice Chairman Rajiv Jain will assume additional responsibilities. Sources say it's premature to assume Sahas' resignation is linked to the top job at IndusInd Bank, where he's one of the three contenders. That's another exclusive. Tilaknagar leads the race to buy the popular whiskey brand ImperialBlue from Pernod Ricard. Sources say the deal is likely to value ImperialBlue at around 4,000 crore rupees. That's another exclusive tonight. An auxiliary power unit on an AirIndia Hong Kong-Delhi flight catches fire shortly after landing. The incident occurred on the Airbus A321 aircraft while passengers had begun disembarking. AirIndia says passengers and crew are safe. Adds the plane has been grounded for further investigation. The Supreme Court begins hearing a rare presidential reference concerning the powers of the president and state governors. The Apex Court issues notices to the union government and all state governments. President Murmu had made the reference following a Supreme Court order that prescribed a timeline for presidents and governors while examining laws. The government expresses concerns over the performance of private sector banks when it comes to implementing financial inclusion schemes. The Finance Ministry tells Parliament that private banks have not performed with their presence in the banking sector. India startup airlines are struggling to take off. Air Kerala, Al Hind Air and Shrunk Air neither have any aircraft nor a flying permit. All three airlines got regulatory approval in 2024 and were hoping to take to the skies by the middle of this year. After 62 years, Indian Air Force will retire the MiG-21 fighter jet. A ceremonial send-off to the aircraft, dubbed as a workhorse, will be held in September. Well, let's go straight to the day's market action. The Sensex and the Nifty closed flat after a range-bound session. Broader markets did underperform today, with the mid-cap slipping over 360 points. Over 30 Nifty stocks closing in the red, with Shriram, Eicher Motors and Adani Ports dragging the index lower. Mid-caps down 364, 200 gone on the Nifty Bank. The Sensex and the Nifty closing absolutely flat today. Now, the market regulator SEBI has granted approval to US-based trading firm Jane Street to resume trading in India. This comes after the company completed the directive to open an escrow account and deposit the unlawful gains of 4,844 crore rupees before the deadline. However, the firm will be closely monitored by stock exchanges during the ongoing SEBI probe. Remember, the ban was imposed over Jane Street's alleged market manipulation in the derivative segment. Shares of Zomato's parent Eternal hitting a record high on renewed optimism over its quick commerce business Blinkit. Now, in its first quarter earnings, Blinkit had reported higher order value compared to the food delivery business, that's Zomato. Shares of rival Swiggy also jumped nearly 5% in trade. Eternal's management said growth and margins have bottomed out for the near term. The rally came despite a steep decline in net profit, which came in at a 25 crore rupees in the June quarter. However, revenue rose 70% to over 7,000 crore rupees. So that stock on fire today. In key earnings, FMCG giant Colgate reporting a weak set of numbers for Q1. Missed street estimates across most parameters. Net profit down 12% to 321 crore rupees. Revenue dipped over 2%. The company's management anticipates a gradual recovery in the second half of the year. Paytm's parent company, 197 Communications, has swung back into the black, reporting a net profit of nearly 123 crore rupees and other income of 241 crores, and a 19% year-on-year reduction in employee costs has helped boost the bottom line for Paytm. In fact, speaking to me in Davos in January this year, Paytm's founder and CEO Vijay Sharma had said the digital payment player is set to achieve profitability by the next quarter. Take a look.
Well, the road ahead looks like that we have committed that next quarter we will be profitable, EBITDA before ESOP, meaning that before the ESOP cost, which is also reducing incidentally, and we should be doing that. So we are working on the business which is now PAT profitable onwards. So after a couple of quarters, we should talk about PAT profitability, and I would go for that.
Well, that was Vijay Sharma speaking to me in January, delivering on that. Now, the big story this evening, a trade deal between India and the US before the 1st of August deadline is ruled out. Sources say the deal has stalled after US proposed 20% tariffs on India and expected zero tariffs in return. Now, this is similar to the deals that the US has struck with Indonesia and Vietnam. Parikshit's here with more in this exclusive news break. Parikshit, many thanks for joining us. So, 1st of August, it seems highly unlikely that there's going to be a deal in place because the 6th round of talks, we will see that take place only in the second half of August. So where does this now leave the India-US trade deal?
Any interim deal between India and US or a mini trade deal before the 1st of August looks unlikely as of now. In fact, the possibility is likely to be ruled out altogether. This is because the talks between India and United States are stalled on certain key issues. Number one, US President Donald Trump has offered a deal to India which is very similar to Indonesia and Vietnam. And India wants a competitive advantage over these countries and not a tariff arrangement on similar lines. Number two, the deal is also stalled because the US government wants to impose a 20% tariff on Indian goods coming into America. On the other hand, they want zero tariff duty treatment in the Indian market for American goods. This is not acceptable to the Indian side because we want the deal to be a win-win and a reciprocal deal. Also, on agriculture and dairy, we believe that the US administration is still pushing for the inclusion of agriculture and dairy items in any kind of trade deal or understanding before the 1st of August. And India will not compromise on these issues. These are red lines in any trade negotiation. Therefore, currently the Indian side has refused to have any further negotiations, at least this month. Talks will continue for a larger bilateral trade agreement. A US team headed by their negotiator Brendan Lynch will be coming to India in August to try and see if there can be a breakthrough in talks with India. For the moment, there is a 10% baseline tariff that the US has imposed on Indian goods, apart from sectoral tariffs on automobiles, on steel and aluminium. It remains to be seen whether the US will impose a 26% reciprocal tariff on India come the 1st of August if a trade deal before that is not agreed upon.
Parikshit, many thanks for joining us. Well, that's a deal that's still not moving as we'd like it to, but one that has been done. Prime Minister Modi will commence his 4th official visit to the UK tomorrow. The Prime Minister and his British counterpart Keir Starmer are expected to sign the free trade agreement between the two nations on Thursday. Sources say both nations have been in close touch since the deal was announced on the 6th of May. So that's going to be something to watch out for, the official signing of the India-UK FTA between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Starmer. Another exclusive tonight, AxisBank eyes an additional 10% stake in its life insurance joint venture with Max Financial Services. It may seek RBI's approval to acquire a stake which will help Max Financial raise 5,000 crores. AxisBank will become the promoter of the company if the deal goes through. That's a CNBC TV 18 exclusive. And here's another today. Shares of Titan surging after its subsidiary signed a definitive agreement to acquire 67% stake in UAE-based Damas Jewellery. The deal is valued at $283 million and is expected to be complete by the Jan of 2026. The acquisition paves the way for Titan to expand into 6 GCC markets. This includes the UAE, Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Shares of Tilaknagar Industries rallied in trade today. This after CNBC TV 18 exclusively reported that the company is leading the race to acquire Pernod Ricard's whiskey brand ImperialBlue. Now, sources tell us the deal is likely to value ImperialBlue at around 4,000 crore rupees, and the acquisition is likely to be funded by a mix of debt and equity. As of FY25, the company has a cash balance of 107 crore rupees. Tilaknagar Industries and Pernod Ricard have not yet responded to CNBC TV 18's query. The big corporate story: in a sudden move, Anup Sahas has resigned as the MD of BajajFinance with immediate effect. Sources tell us it's premature to assume that Sahas' resignation is linked to him bagging the top job at IndiaUS, where he is one of the contenders. Ritu joins us now with the details. Ritu, Sahas, one of the contenders, but it would be premature to assume that his resignation has to do with the top job at IndiaUS?
Well, our sources indicate it may be too early to assume that Anup Sahas resigned from his position as the MD of BajajFinance to take over the top job at IndiaUS. Remember, we were the first to report that Anup Sahas is among the 3 candidates who are in the running for the IndiaUS CEO role. And while his name being in the mix may have had some bearing on internal dynamics at Bajaj Finance, we understand RBI is yet to clear a name for the IndiaUS role. So the idea that he quit specifically to join IndiaUS may be a bit premature. But that said, the resignation itself has come as a surprise, given he was being groomed for the position for the last couple of years and only took over as the MD in April. And so him quitting the role in just under 4 months has raised some questions. Equally important is the fact that Bajaj Finance's long-term MD Rajiv Jain is back at the helm, and he's going to serve as the MD for the remainder of his term until March of 2028. Now, while this will provide a smooth transition for Bajaj, the focus will also move to succession planning. Now, remember, Rajiv Jain has spent more than 15 years as the MD of the company, and while RBI rules limit bank CEO terms to 15 years, there is no such cap for NBFC, so technically he can continue, but the company will still be under pressure to groom the next line of leadership. Now, Jeffries points out that Rajiv Jain may now need to pull back from any advisory role at Bajaj Finserv, and Morgan Stanley calls this a setback to the succession plan that the company had been executing. But with Rajiv Jain back in the driver's seat, they say the situation remains manageable.
Ritu, many thanks. And the government has sent a GST demand notice to the tune of 258 crore rupees to Hyundai India. The company allegedly failed to pay compensation cess. Hyundai India said that it is reviewing the demand notice and will appeal against the orders. Now, an auxiliary power unit on an AirIndia Hong Kong-Delhi flight caught fire shortly after it landed. The incident occurred on the Airbus A321 aircraft while passengers had begun disembarking. Air India has said passengers and crew are safe, adding that the plane has been grounded for further investigation. And speaking of Air India, the airline has concluded precautionary checks on its fuel switch in all of its Boeing 787 and 737 aircraft fleet. The airline has confirmed that no issues were found in the locking mechanism of the switches. Air India said it has started the inspections on the 12th of July, a month after the Air India plane crash, and completed the same within the prescribed time. The big national story: Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar's surprise resignation last evening on the very first day of the monsoon session of Parliament has created a flutter in the corridors of power. Dhanker still had 2 years left in his term. Now, in a letter addressed to President Draupadi Murmu, Dhanker said he will be resigning as Vice President with immediate effect to prioritise healthcare and to abide by any medical advice. Sources say tensions with the government over Dhanker backing an opposition motion to impeach Justice Yashwant Verma over the cash-at-home row could have led to his sudden exit. Dhanker is the first Vice President in close to 40 years to resign mid-term. Before him, V.V. Giri and R. Venkatraman had resigned as Vice Presidents, but only to contest the presidential elections. In a 24-word statement, Prime Minister Modi said, and I quote, "Jagdeep Dhankhar ji has got many opportunities to serve our country in various capacities, including the Vice President of India, wishing him good health," end of quote. Opposition leaders raised questions over his surprise resignation. The Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge said, and I quote, "Only he knows the reason. We have nothing to say on this matter. Either the government knows or he knows it. It is up to the government to accept his resignation or not," end of quote. Dhankar's 5-year tenure was originally set to end on August 2027. In fact, just 10 days ago, the Vice President had said he will complete his term barring any, I quote, divine intervention. Take a look.
I will retire at the right time. August 2027. subject to divine intervention.
हम उनकी अच्छी स्वास्थ्य की कामना तो करते हैं, लेकिन कहीं ना कहीं ऐसा प्रमाण होता है कि केंद्र सरकार और उपराष्ट्रपति के बीच में जो उनका रिश्ता है दोनों के बीच में, वो पहले जैसा नहीं रहा.
Vice President, we wish him the best of health, but a little more elaboration on the circumstances which have led to this decision. Even though it might be a personal decision, but since he holds a public office and there are 146 crore Indians who would be equally interested and invested in knowing the facts, a certain amount of elaboration will help.
दुखद है, दुर्भाग्यपूर्ण है, चौंकाने वाला है. मैं उनसे आग्रह करूंगा वो पुनर्विचार करें.
So Vice President Jagdeep Dhankhar has resigned. His resignation has also been accepted by the government. The Prime Minister has put out a statement commending the contributions of Jagdeep Dhankhar in various positions. But what is the inside story? Is it that the government was upset with him yesterday after he accepted the impeachment motion moved by 65 odd opposition MPs? And did Mr. Dhankhar not keep the government in loop about this particular impeachment motion? Remember, senior ministers like JP Nadda and Kiran Rijiju subsequently did not attend the BAC meeting called by Mr. Dhankhar at 4:30 p.m. Though now Mr. Nadda and Mr. Rijiju both have said that a message was sent to Mr. Dhankhar that they were busy. But this is a surprise series of events. Mr. Dhankhar had just spent about 3 years in this post, and his resignation with immediate effect, which he has written to the president and which has now been accepted, throws open a host of speculations. Was he getting too friendly with the Congress leaders? Was he giving them the extra, benefit sometimes? It is a complete change of the situation, because just a few months back, the Congress had moved an impeachment motion against Mr. Jagdeep Dhankhar in December 2024. What changed completely in the next 6 months, where now there is hushed talk in the parliament corridors that he was being soft, maybe on being too friendly with the Congress leaders. He had met Mr. Mallikarjun Kharge at the VP estate some days ago. Arvind Kejriwal he had met at his residence on Sunday. What has really happened remains under wraps, but it is one thing is very, very clear, that Mr. Jagdeep Dhankhar's resignation has come as a surprise and a shock to many, and he is hung his boots just 3 years into his tenure.
Well, that is where things currently stand. The search is on for India's next vice president. Now, the government has flagged the performance of private sector banks regarding the implementation of financial inclusion schemes. The Finance Ministry told Parliament today that private banks' performance is not commensurate with their presence in the banking sector. Sapna joins us now with the details. Sapna, it's always been public sector banks that have done the heavy lifting as far as financial inclusion is concerned. So it's not entirely new what the Finance Ministry is saying, but what are the details that it's provided?
Well, definitely, it's the details which are a problem. So if you look at the, basic flagship schemes like the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, the participation rate of private sector banks is as low as 3%, which means for every 100, Jan Dhan accounts opened, only 3 accounts have been opened by the private sector banks. And the numbers are really stark. For instance, between March 2020 and March 2025, private sector banks have been able to add only 56 lakh accounts, in comparison to the rest of the public sector universe, doing somewhere around almost 17 crore accounts. So, there is a massive gap. Not just this, but even if you look at the Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Jyoti Bima, here again the participation rate actually drops to around 2%, which means out of all the enrollments, for every 100 enrollment that has happened, only 2 enrollments have come to the private sector banks. Also in terms of the Suraksha Bima Yojana, that is the non-life component that is given by the government, here the participation rate is 4%. Out of every 100 enrollments, only 4 of them have been done by the private sector banks. Well, the rate improves slightly as far as the Atal Pension Bima Yojana is concerned. So, for instance, less than 10 lakh Atal Pension Yojana subscribers with private sector banks in comparison to the public sector universe, which stands at over 7.6 crore. So these are big differences that we are talking about. I think the government's displeasure has come from, emanates from here. Last but not the least, however, the private sector banks performance has really improved as far as the Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana is concerned and the standard scheme is concerned. So in the Mudra Yojana, the participation rate by private sector banks is as high as 24%. So out of total sanction amount of around 5.56 lakh odd crore, private sector banks have taken a slice of around 1.73 lakh crore, which is not really too bad. Similarly, in terms of the standard scheme, here again around 3200 crores worth of sanctions done by the PVBs. In comparison, to the rest of the universe being handled by the public sector banks. So here again, the participation rate is around 23%. So on these two counts, they have done reasonably all right. But I think it's those basic small schemes that the government is talking about, and that's where the nudge is probably required.
All right, Sapna, appreciate you joining us. Now, in what comes as a setback for the crypto industry, the Finance Ministry has rejected a key recommendation to ease the tax burden on virtual digital assets like cryptocurrencies and non-fungible tokens. Now, the Select Committee on the new income tax bill had proposed slashing the TDS rate from 1% to 0.01% and raising the threshold to 5 lakhs, citing industry concerns around liquidity and compliance. Currently, a 1% TDS is deducted once transactions cross 10,000 in a financial year, 50,000 rupees in some cases. The Finance Ministry has pushed back, saying the TDS rates have already been rationalized with just 4 slabs applicable to resident taxpayers now. So no TDS relief for cryptocurrencies or NFTs. In what will bolster India's arsenal, the Army has received the first batch of the Apache fighter helicopters from Boeing. In a post on social media, the Army said the induction of these attack helicopters will significantly boost its operational capabilities. It is the end of an era for the MiG-21 fighter jet. After more than 6 decades in service, the combat aircraft will be formally retired in September with a ceremonial farewell. The aircraft played a vital role in the 1965 Indo-Pak War, the 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War, the Kargil conflict of 1999, and the 2019 Balakot airstrikes. The MiG-21 squadron was also on alert during Operation Sindoor. The British Royal Navy's F-35B fighter jet, which was stranded in Kerala for over a month, flew out of Thiruvananthapuram airport this morning. The fighter returned to the skies after being repaired by a team of engineers from the United Kingdom. The stealth jet was forced to make an emergency landing after a hydraulic fault and power issues forced it to divert from its carrier, the HMS Prince of Wales. The aircraft will now fly to a British aircraft carrier in Australia. Coming up on India Business Hour, India startup airlines are struggling to take off. Air Kerala, Al Hind Air and Shrunk Air neither have any aircraft nor a flying permit. That and more when we return. And catch all of CNBC TV 18's news and updates on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, X and Jio Hotstar. The Supreme Court has begun hearing a rare presidential reference made by Draupadi Murmu concerning the powers of a president and governors. President Murmu had made the reference following a Supreme Court order that prescribed a timeline of a maximum of 3 months for the president to consider a bill referred by a state's governor. Ashmit is standing by with more on the Apex Court's directions to the centre and state governments. This is unprecedented. Ashmit, take us through what transpired in court today and what the next steps are.
Well, this entire issue began with a whole host of opposition-ruled states, the likes of Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Punjab, filing multiple petitions against their respective governors in the Supreme Court, where they said that the governors were sitting on the bills, were acting as a blockade, as a roadblock to the bills that are being passed by these state assemblies. And that is something that the Supreme Court had taken very strong objection to. In fact, in one particular case, in the case of Tamil Nadu, the Supreme Court passed a landmark verdict directing for a 3-month deadline to the governor as well as to the President of India to clear the bills that are being passed by the state assemblies. Now, that is something that invited very strong backlash from certain quarters. In fact, the now former Vice President Jagdeep Dhankhar had said that this special power that is being used by the Supreme Court to give a 3-month deadline is more akin to a nuclear missile against democratic forces, essentially questioning Supreme Court has no business giving directions to the President of India. Now, that was a sum and substance. Subsequent to that, we saw a presidential reference. President Murmu raising a legal question through this presidential reference before the Supreme Court of India, essentially asking, it all boils down to this one question: can the Supreme Court prescribe deadlines to the President of India? Now, as is the norm for these presidential references, there's a bench of 5 judges or more. It was no different this time either. Justice Gawai, the CJI-led bench of 5 judges, decided to hear this matter today. They've issued notices to all the states. This, the CJI Gawai said, is going to be a matter that will have far-reaching implications across the entire length and breadth of the country. And to that end, asking a response on this very question from all states. The responses are to be filed by next week. This case will be taken up for next hearing on July 29th.
Ashmit, many thanks. India's startup airlines are struggling to take off. 3 carriers, Air Kerala, Al Hind Air and Shank Air, got their regulatory approval from the Civil Aviation Ministry in 2024 and were hoping to launch by the middle of this year. But months later, none of them have inducted a single aircraft and their air operators' certificates remain out of reach. Madhiya is here to tell us what's dealing their takeoff. Madhiya.
Well, according to DGCA sources, Air Kerala, Al Hind Air are in the phase 3 of their certification process, where manuals and operational documents are being evaluated. Shank Air, meanwhile, is yet to even submit a formal operational plan. The big roadblock is finding a plane. Until these airlines bring in at least 1 aircraft, they cannot move to phase 4, which is demonstration flights, and ultimately move to the last phase of certification and securing the air operator permit. So why are they struggling to get a plane? Foreign lessors are reluctant sending their aircraft to startups in India, fearing their plane will be stuck here if the airline fails to survive. And this reluctance is due to past disputes involving aircraft repossession and weak enforcement of the Cape Town Convention. The Cape Town Convention, remember, is an international treaty that protects aircraft lessors. It ensures they can quickly take back their planes if an airline defaults or shuts down. Go First's bankruptcy is the recent example where lessors had to move the court to take their aircraft back despite India being a signatory to the Cape Town Convention. A senior official at one of these startups told CNBC TV18 that lessors are asking for massive deposits, sometimes 12 months of rent upfront, or proof that the airline has about 200 crores in the bank. The delay in securing planes is not the only headache. These startups have also hired employees for the key positions like CEO, CFO, head of security, head of safety, pilots, cabin crew. The official told us they're incurring a cost of 1.5 crores a month on salaries and overheads, and there is no clarity when they will start flying. Now, Air Kerala and Al Hind Air had earlier told CNBC TV18 about starting operations with ATRs that are 70 to 80-seater aircraft, and then bring in the narrow-body planes like the A320 or the Boeing 737 MAX to eventually focus on the Gulf routes. These airlines had targeted mid-2025 to commence operations. As the official told us, the AOC process, the Air Operator Certificate process, can't move forward without aircraft, and lessors are reluctant to be the first ones with a new Indian carrier. And with half of 2025 done, will these airlines take off in 2025 at all? That's the big question.
Well, 3 airlines quite literally waiting in the wings. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of India Business Hour. Thanks very much for watching. The news will continue right here on CNBC TV18. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a moment with more.